Hi there, Fiddler Dan here, and I'm here to tell you today all about what to look for if you decide to go and buy a second-hand violin yourself, such as on Facebook or Gumtree. I reckon there's about a dozen things to look for, so I'm going to go through them with you in case you want to go out and get yourself a violin that's competitively priced. So I'm going to start first with the bow. So bow makes half of the sound, so it's pretty important. So you want to make sure that it's got plenty of hair, unlike myself. If it's a little bit dirty here, that's okay. You can actually wash that. That's not too bad. The other thing that you want to check is up here at the tip. This is probably the weakest point of the bow here, so if you see a crack line there, someone's probably had a go at gluing it, and it may or may not stand up to that in the future. When you tighten the bow, and you know that a bow's tight enough if you tap it on your wrist, you want to make sure that in here is about a pencil width apart. If the bow starts to go in an inverted shape, when you tighten it, that means the stick isn't really strong enough, so steer clear of that bow. Okay, that's the bow. What about the case? Well, I reckon you've probably had enough suitcases in your life that you can tell what makes a good case and what doesn't. But just in case you can't, a case like this, it's a foam core, and you can see that that's started to come away. Now that looks pretty unsightly, but actually it's structurally sound. And you can check that just by looking at the handle here. If I pull on the handle, does it hold well enough? Are there any cracks here in the material of the case, and so on. So that case is okay, but maybe not the prettiest. What's the third thing on my list? Okay, we're going to look now at the body of the violin itself. Firstly, violins are made to come apart so that they can be repaired. They're put together with something called the hide glue, and in an environment where we have high temperatures and high humidity, sometimes they can come unstuck. And so the weakest glue is on the top of the violin because that's made to come apart. So if you just look around here on both sides of the violins, if you see a little gap there that you can either see darkness or slide a business card through, then you've got an open crack there. Now that's quite fixable, but if you're buying an instrument, you've then got to go and get someone like me to fix that for you. Don't try and do that yourself. Certainly don't use any of the glues that you have in your workshop at home. Body cracks. Sometimes, through misadventure, you'll get cracks in a violin's cases, in a violin as well. Commonly, you see them around the weak points, such as here, or you might see them in the high stress points around the bridge here. Other places that you'll see cracks are where the two pieces of wood on the back here join. So look carefully at that. If you push gently, you shouldn't see one piece moving rather than the other. Cracks can also appear in other places. One of those places, and this is my fourth place to look, or rather my fifth place, is at the end pin here. This is what ties all the strings together on the violin. So there's a lot of stress here, and so if you see the angle of that end pin not being straight, or you see some cracks here sideways, you may be buying yourself trouble there. Sometimes these cracks here are superficial because the end pin is made of ebony, so it's a harder wood than this maple here on either side. And so as this wood shrinks, especially on a student violin where the woods haven't been aged all that long, you can get a superficial crack. But inside the violin here is a block of wood that this goes into. You need to know that there's no crack in that block of wood, and that's probably something you can't find out yourself. Next up is looking at the other end of the violin, up here at the pegs and where the pegs are. So what we want to do here is check, do the pegs turn nicely? Sometimes as violins age and through use, you can feel it goes hard, soft, hard, soft. That's because this hole here has ended up a little bit elliptical. Easy to fix, but probably not by you unless you have the right tool. And if it is grabbing there, then the strings will slip. It'll be hard to stay in tune. So that might need some work there. Sometimes when you're turning your pegs, you may hear a cracking noise here as the wood against wood slips and grips. That in itself is nothing to be concerned about, but if it's too loud and too tight, you might end up developing a crack in the wood here itself. So just looking around each of these holes on both sides of the scroll just to see is quite useful. Okay, next up is the bridge. And the bridge here, right here in the violin, is what the strings sit on to vibrate. It's a very thin piece of maple and quite prone to bending over if it's not adjusted properly or if it's not fitted properly. So just check that the bridge is straight. It can be adjusted up and down, of course, on the violin, but you want to check that the wood itself isn't bent. Have a closer look at the feet of the bridge here as well, and just check that they're making full contact with the body there. That tells you that the bridge has been properly fitted. Next up are the strings. Strings need to be above the fingerboard, but not too high above the fingerboard. And there's a set of measurements here that can tell us what they should be. You can check easily yourself by pushing down with your fingers, and if you have to push down a long way, then probably the bridge needs to be lowered so that it can be refitted. And this one here, I haven't worked on this one yet. It's probably a little bit high with the finger action. Chips and cracks, especially on student instruments, you'll often see lots of chips and cracks on it. These are usually not something to worry about in the short term, but longer term they can be something to worry about, because this is a point for moisture ingress or for a crack to propagate. So they really do need to be sealed up if you want your violin to last well. Strings. This violin, of course, needs a new G string, but it needs some other new strings as well. You can generally tell the condition of the string by how much dirt and grime is on it here, and where they're up here, where the fingers have been pushing on it, if the windings on the strings have started to separate. Strings last about a year. You can push that out a bit longer. So generally, if you see one bad string, all of them are going to be likely to be needing to be replaced. So they hold their tone and they sound good. Next up, if you look through here, in the F hole, you can see the brand of the violin written in there on a label. You can just go and Google that label, and that will give you an idea of how good the instrument is. Well, you can see how much it cost when it was new anyway. And that's a good guide to whether you're getting a good price for your instrument. I will tell you with brands though, nearly every student violin today is made in China, even if it's made under a German or a European brand. So they're all coming out of the same place. The quality control is what matters, and the timbers themselves are what matter. So there's something to look at as well. Generally, higher quality timbers. This is a beautiful flamed back here and flamed sides. That's a higher quality timber because you can only take certain parts of the tree for that, and there's more wastage. So higher quality wood is more expensive. Only a better violin maker will use better timbers. So it's a rough guide that you're getting a nicer instrument. The front panel here, which is spruce, generally you're looking for fine, regular, even grains here, and that will tell you that you've got some nice timbers there. So price when new, and how much do you need to spend on your student's violin? I reckon, if you start at $300 and add $100 a year for every year that you're playing the violin, that'll give you a rough guide to an instrument that performs about as well as you can get out of the instrument. So that's my dozen tips on what to look for in a violin. I will just give you one more, and that is, don't be afraid to ask the provenance of the violin itself. That is, how did the previous owner come by it, and where did they get it? Sometimes people are quite shy because they might have got it third hand. That's okay. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with the instrument. It means that it might need a service to get it to be performing at its best. And also, if you know that they got it from a reputable store, for example, then that gives you an idea that you're getting yourself a quality instrument. So, look, if you're out on Facebook or Gumtree buying yourself an instrument, keep these things in mind. Of course, you can always come and see me, but that's the only plug that I'm going to give today. Bye for now.